The next morning, the air in the Montgomery mansion felt unusually heavy. Emery stood by his window, half hidden behind the curtain, his heart thudding quietly in his chest as he watched the black car pull up the driveway. Julian stepped out, looking calm and impeccably put together, his expression composed but unreadable. Emery's fingers curled around the curtain. Downstairs, Devon greeted Julian like an old friend, his handshake firm and his smile too wide to be genuine. "Julian, you're welcome," he boomed. "Come, let's go to my office. We have much to discuss." Julian followed, his expression polite but distant. Every corner of that house felt familiar, the scent of aged wood, the faint echo of laughter from years ago. But he forced himself to stay calm, his features smooth, his tone steady. This wasn't the time to let old memories, or old anger, show. Inside Devon's office, the air was thick with the scent of cigars and expensive whiskey. Devon gestured for him to sit, his sharp eyes studying Julian's face as though trying to place him. "So," Devon began, leaning back in his chair, "you really intend to marry my son, eh?" Julian met his gaze, his voice smooth but laced with quiet conviction. "Yes, sir. I do." Devon chuckled, clearly pleased. "Well, that's quite the announcement you made in public. You don't waste time, do you?" Julian offered a faint smile. "When you know what you want, there's no point in pretending otherwise. I have known Emery for some time now and he's the perfect person to spend the rest of my life with." Devon nodded slowly, tapping his fingers against his desk. "Tell me about yourself, Julian. I've heard quite a lot about your success, but I like to know the man who might join my family." Julian expected this. He sat straighter, voice measured. "I was adopted," he began. "As you well know, my father, Lord Halstead, took me in when I was a boy and raised me as his own. He passed away a few years ago, but before he did, he entrusted me with his entire business empire." Devon's eyebrows lifted in interest. "That's wonderful." "Yes," Julian said simply. "I've done my best to uphold his legacy." "And your biological parents?" Devon asked, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp and probing. Julian's jaw tightened slightly before he answered, his expression unchanged. "That's a part of my life I'd rather not talk about. My adoptive father was all the family I needed." For a brief moment, silence stretched between them. Devon's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Julian's face. "You look familiar," he said finally. "Have we met before?" Julian's lips curved into a polite, practiced smile. "Once or twice, perhaps. We ran into each other on the ship, if you recall. And again at that masked gala I hosted." "Ah yes," Devon said slowly, his suspicion easing into amusement. Right. You do seem like the kind of man who makes an impression." Julian forced a small chuckle. "I'll take that as a compliment." Devon leaned forward, his expression shifting to business. "Well, since we're talking about marriage, there's something you should know. My company, Montgomery Textiles, has seen better days. The market's shifting, costs are up. I could use a strong partner." He smiled, that familiar calculating glint in his eyes. "If you truly want to marry Emery, perhaps you could lend a hand. Financially speaking." Julian kept his face perfectly neutral, though inwardly, the irony stung. Still the same man, he thought bitterly. Always reaching for what isn't his. "That won't be a problem," Julian said coolly. "Money isn't something I lack, and if this partnership benefits both of us, then I'm more than willing to help." Devon's grin widened. "Excellent. That's the kind of answer I like to hear." Julian nodded, rising from his seat with measured grace. "I'm looking forward to working with you, Mr. Montgomery," he said. "As am I, my son. As am I." Devon insisted Julian stay for breakfast, and before long the four of them, Devon, Julian, Emery, and Hale, were seated at the long oak dining table. Devon, as usual, tried to play the charming host. He cleared his throat and gave a booming laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Well," he began, looking between Emery and Julian, "I can't tell you how thrilled I am about this wedding. It'll be quite the event, I assure you. We must begin the preparations right away." Julian smiled politely, taking a sip of his coffee without answering. But before he could say a word, Emery spoke up, setting down his fork with a sharp clink. "There's not going to be a wedding," he said flatly, his tone calm but his eyes burning. Devon blinked, surprised. "What do you mean, son?" Emery leaned back in his chair, his expression dry. "Not until I know for sure who he really is. I can't exactly trust a man who was." He sighed, willing the thought of Julian together with Hale out of his mind. Anyway, Julian's still a stranger. Hale stifled a smirk, glancing at Julian, curious to see how he'd take that. But Julian merely looked amused. A faint, knowing smile tugged at the corner of his lips as he turned his gaze to Emery. "A stranger, he said softly, setting down his cup. "Then perhaps we should change that." Devon raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, Halstead?" Julian turned to him smoothly, his tone respectful but laced with quiet confidence. "If you'll permit it, Mr. Montgomery, I'd like Emery to move into my estate. It's the best way for us to understand each other, to live together, talk, learn each other's habits. That way, when we marry, there'll be no surprises." The table went completely silent. Emery froze, eyes widening in disbelief. Hale nearly dropped his fork. Even Devon looked momentarily stunned before breaking into a delighted grin. "Well, that's an excellent idea," Devon exclaimed, clapping his hands together. "Yes, that's exactly what you two need. Emery, you'll pack your things and go with Julian today." "Wait, what?" Emery snapped, turning to his father. "You can't be serious. I'm not moving in with him." Devon's expression hardened instantly. "Enough, Emery. You heard him, he's your fiancé. It's time you start acting like it." "But..." "No buts," Devon cut him off, his voice sharp. "You belong to Julian now. Your place is by his side. Pack your things at once." Devon then turned back to Julian, his mood bright again. "I trust you'll take good care of him," he said warmly. Julian inclined his head. "You have my word, sir." As soon as breakfast ended, Emery stormed upstairs to his room, his steps heavy. Caroline followed quietly behind him, concern etched on her face. "Sir Emery," she said softly, "shall I help you pack?" Emery sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just a few essentials. The rest you can send later." "Yes, sir," Caroline murmured. "I'll make sure everything else is delivered to you." Later that day, Hale leaned against the wall, watching through the window as Julian's car was brought around. His chest burned with resentment as he saw Emery step outside, suitcase in hand. Julian stood beside the car, calm as ever, speaking to the driver. He barely spared Hale a glance. Julian opened the car door, his voice cool. "Ready?" Emery gave a short nod and climbed in without another word. The car pulled away moments later, disappearing down the long driveway. Hale stood there for a long time, his fists clenched at his sides, watching the dust settle. His chest tightened with jealousy, frustration, and something darker he didn't care to name. "I won't let this slide," he muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. The drive was long and quiet. Emery sat by the window, his eyes fixed on the road, pretending to be engrossed by the scenery. Julian sat beside him, his expression unreadable. The low hum of the car engine was the only sound between them. Every now and then, Emery would glance at him, then quickly look away when their eyes almost met. He hated how his chest tightened in Julian's presence, how the man's calm confidence made him feel both safe and uneasy. When the car finally pulled into the grand estate, Emery's heart skipped a beat. Nicky was already waiting by the entrance, his smile wide as the car stopped. "Welcome home," he called out cheerfully as Julian stepped out first. Emery got out slowly, looking around, his brow furrowing. "Nicky," he said, walking toward him, "how could you do this to me? You knew who he really was all along." Nicky hesitated, his smile fading. "Emery, it's not like that." "Don't lie," Emery cut him off, hurt flashing in his eyes. "You should have told me. I thought we were close." Nicky sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I wanted to, believe me. But Julian is my boss. I had to follow his orders." Julian's voice came from behind them, cool and firm. "And I still do." There was something sharp in his tone that made Emery turn. Julian's jaw was slightly clenched, maybe from irritation, or perhaps jealousy, and his gaze flickered between the two men. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward the house. "You've seen enough of the driveway." Julian led the way inside, and as soon as Emery stepped through the door, a wave of nostalgia hit him like a punch to the gut. Everything looked exactly the same. The grand staircase, the chandelier that cast soft golden light, the faint scent of sandalwood that lingered in the air, it was all untouched. The house of the St. Clairs. Emery's breath caught. "This place," he whispered. Julian stopped a few steps ahead, watching him quietly as Emery wandered through the hall, touching the furniture, the walls, the framed paintings. "It's all the same," Emery murmured, his voice trembling. "Not a single thing's changed." He smiled faintly, though his eyes shimmered. Julian said nothing. He just watched the way Emery's expression softened, the way old memories seemed to flood him, piece by piece. Eventually, Emery made his way upstairs and paused at a familiar door. He pushed it open and froze. "This was Julian's room," he whispered. "But, someone's been living here." Julian leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "That would be me." Emery turned, startled. "You? But, why not the main room?" Julian smiled faintly, masking the flicker of unease in his chest. "I like the view better," he said smoothly. "It's quiet, comfortable." Emery frowned, unconvinced, but before he could push further, Julian stepped closer, changing the subject. "You seemed emotional earlier," he said softly. "Why?" Emery let out a shaky laugh. "This was Julian St. Clair's room," he said. "He was a good person. He didn't deserve what happened. I'm glad you didn't change anything here." Julian's lips curved into a smirk. "You speak about him like he meant something more than just a friend." Emery blinked, flustered. "What?" "No, he was just." Julian stepped closer, his voice dropping low, teasing. "Then why are you blushing? Tell me, Emery, who was Julian St. Clair to you? Because right now, I can't help feeling jealous." Emery took a step back, heart pounding. "You're ridiculous," he muttered, though his cheeks had turned crimson. Julian's eyes glinted with amusement as he took another step forward. "Am I?" Emery tried to retreat again, but his foot caught the edge of the rug. He gasped, stumbling backward, and before he could fall, Julian's arm shot out, catching him effortlessly. For a moment, time froze. Emery was pressed against Julian's chest, his breath shallow. Their faces were close, too close. He could feel Julian's breath against his skin, warm and steady, smell the faint trace of cologne and something darker, intoxicating. Their eyes met, deep blue locking with amber, and the world seemed to fade away. Emery's pulse raced as his gaze flickered to Julian's lips, his mind betraying him with thoughts he couldn't suppress. He wanted to look away, to move, but he couldn't. And then. Ahem. A deliberate cough echoed from the doorway. They turned toward the doorway and froze. Standing there were two servants, a man and a woman, clearly caught off guard by what they'd just seen. The woman's cheeks flushed pink, while the man quickly looked away. I'm sorry, sir," the man stammered, bowing his head. We didn't mean to intrude. Julian cleared his throat, equally flustered. It's fine, he said smoothly, regaining his composure almost immediately. Emery, these are my staff. This is James, my butler, and this is Veronica, my housekeeper. James gave a polite bow. Welcome, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here. We'll make sure you're comfortable. Veronica smiled warmly. Yes, Mr. Emery. Please let us know if you need anything. Thank you, Emery replied awkwardly, his face still warm from the earlier moment. I would like to rest. Could I be shown my own room, please? Veronica exchanged a quick glance with Julian, who gave her a subtle nod. I'm so sorry, sir, she said gently. There aren't any other rooms available right now. We weren't expecting you, and I haven't had time to prepare one. Emery frowned. Really? In a mansion this big, there isn't one spare room? I'm afraid not, Veronica replied with a small, apologetic smile. Julian stepped forward, suppressing a smirk. Emery, he said calmly, just stay in my room for now. Be patient. Then, with that teasing glint in his eye, he added, or are you afraid I might eat you in your sleep? Emery's face turned scarlet. What? Afraid of what? James and Veronica both looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. They quickly excused themselves and slipped out, trying to hide their smiles. As soon as they were gone, Emery turned to Julian, glaring. Don't try anything funny, Julian. I mean it. Julian chuckled under his breath, leaning casually against the bedpost. Relax. I can be a gentleman when I need to be, he said, his voice dropping lower, more playful. But, he moved closer, eyes glinting mischievously. When I see something I like, that gentleman side tends to vanish. So you might want to stop looking so beautiful, it makes it very hard to control myself. Emery's heart skipped. You're a pervert, he shot back, remembering Hale's tease. Julian only smiled, unbothered. You're acting like you're holding yourself back, Emery, he murmured, leaning close enough for Emery to feel his breath. Don't. Just give in to it. Then he straightened, his tone suddenly cool and confident. It's only a matter of time before you'll be begging me to touch you, he said before turning and walking away, leaving Emery speechless. As Julian's footsteps faded down the hall, Emery stood frozen, pulse racing. He exhaled shakily, realizing just how dangerous, and intoxicating, Julian could be. Hale arrived at Rupert's house just past dusk, the air heavy with tension even before he stepped inside. The front door was unlocked, hanging slightly ajar. He pushed it open and was greeted by the sharp smell of whiskey and the low hum of a jazz record playing somewhere in the background. Rupert sat slumped against the couch, shirt half unbuttoned, an almost empty bottle dangling loosely in his hand. He hadn't even changed from his clothes. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw shadowed with stubble, he looked nothing like the confident man everyone else saw. Drinking yourself to death already? Hale asked softly, slowly entering the room. Rupert shot him a glare. What the hell are you doing here, Hale? His voice was hoarse, worn down by anger and heartbreak. Get out. Hale moved closer, his tone calm but laced with quiet frustration. You look pathetic. Emery's gone, Rupert. He made his choice. Stop torturing yourself over someone who doesn't want you. Rupert gave a bitter laugh and poured himself another drink. Easy for you to say. You've never loved anyone. You just sleep your way through whatever makes you feel wanted for 5 minutes. The word stung, but Hale didn't flinch. He sat beside Rupert, their knees brushing. Maybe, he said quietly. But at least I don't waste my time pining after someone who doesn't want me. Instead, I calculate, I plan another to get what I want. Rupert scoffed. What are you doing, Hale? Trying to comfort me with your body? You think that's going to fix anything? Hale leaned in, voice low, teasing but full of intent. Maybe not. But it'll make you forget, for a while. Rupert turned his head sharply, glaring at him. You're unbelievable. You'd crawl into anyone's bed if it got you attention. Hale's lips curved into a small, sad smile. Maybe. But right now, I just want you. Rupert's hand shot out, gripping Hale's chin hard enough to make him wince. You really want to cross this line, he said coldly, eyes dark with warning. Because if you do, there's no going back. You'll be mine. And if I ever find out you're just another whore like my mother, his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, I'll kill you. Hale met his gaze steadily, the pain of that insult flickering briefly across his face before he forced it away. Then kill me, he whispered, leaning closer. But not before you kiss me. Rupert froze for a moment, torn between rage and desire. Then, with a frustrated growl, he grabbed Hale by the neck and crushed his lips against his. That night, amid broken glass and whispered names, Rupert and Hale surrendered, to anger, to lust, and to the ache of being seen when they both least wanted to be. That night, the house was quiet except for the faint patter of rain against the windows. Emery was soaking in a warm bath, the steam fogging up the mirrors as he tried to relax his nerves. Everything that had happened that day still felt surreal, moving into Julian's mansion, the awkward tension between them, the lingering glances he couldn't quite decipher. He leaned back, letting his head rest against the edge of the tub, when suddenly, he heard the soft creak of the door opening. His heart skipped a beat. He froze. Julian, he called cautiously, his voice trembling a little. The sound of footsteps drew closer. Emery grabbed a towel and stepped out of the bathroom, wrapping it tightly around his neck. When he looked up, there was Julian standing by the door, eyes dark and unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Julian's gaze flicked over Emery's damp skin, the droplets glistening under the soft light. There was unmistakable desire in his eyes, but just as quickly as it came, he blinked it away, his jaw tightening as he looked aside. You should come out, Julian said finally, his voice deeper than usual. Dinner's ready. Emery nodded quickly, his cheeks burning. Oh okay. I'll be there soon. Julian gave a curt nod and left, closing the door behind him. Emery exhaled shakily, clutching the towel tighter around himself. What was that, he thought, confused, and more flustered than he cared to admit. Later that night, Julian sat in his study, a glass of wine untouched beside him as he pored over a stack of documents. The faint hum of rain outside filled the silence. Nikki's voice came through, teasing yet concerned. So, how's it going? How does it feel having Emery under the same roof? Julian leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples with a tired smile. It feels strange. I thought it will be easy but, he paused, staring blankly at the papers before him. Now, I feel like I'm losing control. Every time I'm around Emery, I feel aroused? Nikki interrupted with a laugh. Julian shot him a glare. Don't make it sound filthy. It's just, he's so innocent. So pure. He doesn't even realize how tempting he is. I keep telling myself to stay away, but my body. Julian, Nikki cut in, tone more serious now, you need to control yourself. If you scare him off, all your efforts will be wasted. Treat him with respect, or he'll run before you even get the chance to win him over. Julian sighed. You're right. I know you're right. Just then, a loud crack of thunder echoed through the night, followed by the heavy drumming of rain. Julian's head shot up, his instincts tightening. He didn't say another word. Julian. Nikki's called out, but Julian had already stood abruptly and walked out of the study, his footsteps quick and purposeful. When he entered Emery's room, the lights were dim. Emery was curled up under the blanket, trembling in his sleep. His brows were furrowed, his breathing uneven. Another flash of lightning lit up the room, and a soft whimper escaped his lips. Julian's heart ached at the sight. Without hesitation, he crossed the room and sat beside him, gently pulling Emery into his arms. "Shoo, it's okay," he murmured softly, brushing a strand of hair from Emery's face. "It's just thunder." But Emery's body was still trembling, so Julian did the only thing that came naturally: he began to hum a tune. The same lullaby he used to sing to him years ago when they were children. The melody was soft, nostalgic, and full of warmth. Gradually, Emery's breathing steadied. The tension in his body eased as he unconsciously snuggled closer, his head resting against Julian's chest. The warmth of Emery's body against his, the steady rhythm of his breathing, it all felt too right, too familiar. Julian lay down beside him, still holding him close. His eyelids grew heavy, and before he knew it, both of them had drifted into sleep, Emery safe in his arms, and Julian wrapped in the quiet, dangerous comfort of love he swore he no longer believed in. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Like and subscribe. Have a great day.